My name is Joran Vask, Sergeant 71st Dravain Levi Astra Militarum. I want that said plainly, once before anything else, because where I'm going tomorrow, plain facts matter more than they used to. I was born on Dravain's Hold, and if you've never stood on an anvil, you don't know what that word means the way we do. The Hold isn't a world so much as a forge that happens to have people living inside it. No soil worth farming, no sky worth looking at, just the permanent orange haze off the foundry stacks, thick enough some years you couldn't see the second moon at all. Everything on Dravain exists to make one thing: guns, hulls, shells and soldiers to carry them. We were the fifth kind of ammunition. Nobody said it like that, but everybody knew it. I remember the creche halls before I remember my own mother's face. Bunks, stacked 6-high iron grey blankets, a chaplain tutor who taught us the litany of obedience before he taught us to read. My first toy was a spent Lascelles casing, still warm from the stamping line, and I carried it in my pocket until I was 9, when a drill master took it off me and told me a soldier doesn't carry sentiment, he carries what he's issued. Death wasn't hidden from us. It was curriculum. By 6, I'd seen a foundry accident. A man folded into a stamping press so fast there wasn't even much sound, just the machine's rhythm catching for half a beat and then going on. By 8, I understood what a work quota execution was, not from being told but from watching one happen in the yard between shift changes, the whole levy assembled to witness, because on Dravain watching was part of the lesson. The lesson that mattered most came when I was 12. There was a boy in my dormitory row, Aaron Koss, who ran. Not far. You can't get far on a world that's one continuous foundry hive. But far enough that they had to send men after him with dogs and a voxhound to bring him back. They marched him out in front of the whole creche block, and the commissar adjutant assigned to our sector, a woman named Ilse van Trier, read the tally of what his desertion had cost. Hours of labor lost, munitions unforged, a whole line's quota unmet. She didn't shout. That was the thing I remembered. She never shouted. She spoke like she was reading a supply manifest, and when she was done, she shot him herself, 1 round, and told the rest of us that mercy was a resource like any other, and Dravain could not afford to waste it on those who wasted us. I didn't cry. None of us did. Not where she could see. I understood, even then, in the flat animal way a child understands weather, that this was simply how the world worked, and the only question left to me was what kind of soldier I intended to be inside it. At 16, I took the oath. There's a ceremony for it. Torchlight, the regimental banner unfurled, every recruit pressing a palm to the muzzle of a las rifle, heated from the forge that morning, so the metal still stings when you swear on it. I remember the smell most. Hot iron, tallow smoke, and underneath it the mineral stink of the hold's air that never quite leaves your clothes. That was the day I met the people I'd carry with me for the next 30 years, the ones still with me and the ones who aren't. Sergeant Ilian Krast took our squad that day, a broad, sun-cured man with a laugh like a hinge that needed oil, who'd already survived 2 campaigns and treated every new recruit like a debt he owed his own dead friends. Corporal Tamsin Rake had a tongue sharper than her bayonet and no patience for cowardice, real or performed. She became, within a year, closer to me than my own blood, though I never once told her that while she lived. Hesk Doro, who everyone called Bull for reasons that needed no explaining once you saw him carry a heavy stubber like a satchel, was the gentlest man I ever served beside, and the least suited by temperament for what we did. Van Torskell was my rival before he was my friend, competed with me for every marksmanship badge on the training range, and lost more often than he'd admit, and never once let it curdle into anything but a grudge we both enjoyed. And Priska On came to us younger and later, a transfer from a shattered regiment, quiet in a way that made you watch her, because quiet people either break first or outlast everyone. Our first deployment was to a mining moon whose name I won't waste breath on now, infested with orc raiders who'd cracked the surface domes for salvage and stayed to make a war of it. Nobody prepares you for the noise, not the guns you expect. It's the orcs themselves, the sheer glad violence of them, roaring into lasfire like it was a party they'd been waiting for. We were dug into a processing trench, 40 of us, and they came over the ridge in numbers that made the maths simple and ugly. I remember Krast's voice cutting through the chaos. Not panicked, just loud, calling fire corrections like he was directing traffic. I remember the recoil of my laser gun against my shoulder until the muscle went numb, the smell of ozone and burnt orc hide, which is its own particular stink. Sweetish and wrong. We held. 11 didn't walk away. It was, Krast told us after, a good ratio for the guard. I didn't sleep for 3 nights and told no one. The campaign that followed ground on for 4 years, moving us world to world as the orc war metastasized through the sector, and it taught me what the guard truly is underneath the banners and the litanies, an accounting exercise conducted in human bodies. Ammunition rationed to the round. Reinforcements arriving as green boys who didn't know how to hold a weapon and were, within weeks, either veterans or names on a manifest. We measured victory in how much less we'd lost than the enemy, and even that arithmetic favored us only sometimes. Krast lost his laugh somewhere in year 3. Bull kept his kindness, impossibly, feeding half his ration to stray habcats on worlds we were about to abandon to the enemy as if it mattered, as if anything there would still be alive by nightfall. Maybe that was the point. Maybe it did matter, precisely because it wouldn't last. It was in that campaign's last worst siege that I saw something that had nothing to do with orcs at all. We'd taken a fortified basilica depot from cultists, human ones, worse than orcs in every way that counts, because orcs don't pretend to be anything but what they are. These had been villagers once, farmers, a whole agri-settlement's worth of ordinary people who'd turned their prayers towards something with teeth in the warp. And by the time we broke their lines, the depot walls were scrawled floor to ceiling in a script that hurt to look at directly, letters that seemed to rearrange themselves if you held your eyes on them too long. Rake found the altar room first. I heard her call out, level and steady, the way she always was, and then I heard her stop being steady. What came through the breach wasn't flesh in any honest sense. It wore the shape of a man the cultists must have sacrificed, but the shape kept sliding, joints bending wrong, a smell like copper and rot and something underneath that made your teeth ache. Voxcasters shrieked static. 2 men's hearts simply stopped where they stood, no wound on them at all. Rake went in swinging her bayonet like faith itself, screaming the litany of the Aquila with a voice I'd never heard her use, and she bought the rest of us the 4 seconds we needed to bring the vaulted ceiling down with a demolition charge and seal the thing beneath 100 tons of stone. She didn't come out. I won't describe what we found when, weeks later, engineers finally cleared the rubble enough to recover what could be recovered. I'll only say that the Emperor's light, whatever comfort it gives the rest of us, has to compete out here against things that unmake you in ways no honest bullet ever could. And that after that day, I understood why the Imperium fears the warp more than it fears any army of orcs or aliens. An enemy of flesh, you can grieve properly. That thing left us grieving something we couldn't even name right. The catastrophe came 2 years after that, and it broke something in me that the years of dying hadn't managed to touch. Word reached us by relay, garbled, then confirmed. Kethranor's spire, the hive capital of our whole sector, the world half of us had been told since childhood, was the reason Dravane forged its guns at all. Kethranor had fallen, not besieged. Fallen. A warp incursion had cracked its shield generatorium in a single night, and by the time relief fleets arrived, there was nothing left to relieve. 12 billion souls. The Lord Militant who'd commanded our sector for 2 decades, a man whose portrait hung in every barracks mess on Dravain, dead with it, or worse than dead. Buldoro died 3 days after the news reached us, in an engagement so minor it barely deserved a name, and I've never fully believed that was a coincidence. I think something in him had already decided the account was closed. He went forward covering a retreat that didn't need covering, took a bolt round meant for cover fire nobody was giving, and died before I reached him. He was smiling when I got there. I've turned that smile over in my mind for 15 years and never once made peace with it. I remember sitting in the mess that night with Vantor Skell, both of us hollowed out, and asking him, not rhetorically, I actually needed the answer, what any of it had been for. 12 billion people and a Lord Militant and Bull gone, and the guns kept firing, and the Imperium kept standing, and none of it seemed to weigh anything against what we'd lost. Skell didn't answer me like a man trying to comfort me. He answered like a man who'd already fought this argument with himself and won it. Barely. He said Kethranor didn't fall because we were weak. It fell because the dark does not stop pressing just because a world is important. He said the only thing that had ever kept the black tide off any world, Dravain included, was ordinary people standing in a line and refusing to be the ones who moved first. He said the Emperor didn't need us to win every war. He needed us to keep showing up to the ones we'd lose, because a species that stops showing up is a species already dead, and the difference between the Imperium and everything it fights is that we do not stop, even when stopping would be so much easier. He said Bull didn't die for nothing. He died so the man behind him got to decide later whether his own death would mean something too. That was the whole inheritance, not victory, continuance. I didn't feel better that night. But I kept fighting the next morning, and the morning after, and I think that was the only proof Skell's words needed. Krast didn't live to hear that speech. We lost him the year before, in the mud outside a Prometheum refinery, a death so ordinary after everything else that it barely felt real when it happened. But I've carried what he taught me the way I carry what Skell said. I made sergeant not long after Kethranor fell, and since then I've done for younger soldiers what Krast did for me. Taught them how to hold a rifle steady when their hands don't want to. Taught them the specific silence you keep after a friend dies so the grief doesn't spread to the whole line. Taught them Dravain's old oath, even though most of them these days have never set foot on the hold at all. Priska On is a sergeant herself now, training recruits 3 trenches over, and when I watch her work, I see Krast's patience and Rake's spine, and none of the softness the years should have knocked out of her, but somehow didn't. The regiment isn't Dravain anymore, not really. It's whoever wears the badge and keeps the oath. That's the part nobody tells you when you're young. The homeworld gives you the shape, but the culture is what survives it, and the culture doesn't need the soil it grew in once it's rooted in people instead. Tomorrow, I ship out again. 51 years old, more scar tissue than a man my age has any right to carry, and I am not afraid to say the words plainly, because plain is what's left to me now. I am tired. I have buried more of my own than I can number without the manifest in front of me, and I have seen things in the dark that no chaplain's litany fully closes the door on. But I am standing in the transport bay tonight with my kit checked twice, my rifle cleaned, and Priska's new recruits filing past me trying not to look as frightened as they are, and I find that the tiredness doesn't change the answer. It never has. They ask me sometimes what Dravain's hold was like, the ones who never saw it, and I tell them it doesn't matter what it was like. What matters is what it made. An anvil doesn't care what strikes it, it only cares that it doesn't crack. The anvil does not break, it only forges harder blows. Tomorrow I forge one more.